If you're in Denver, Colorado and foreclosure is knocking, don't panic. You've got more control than you think. So today we're talking about foreclosure with Jeff Phillips, Vindicator Solutions. And if you like watching this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. So thanks for being here today, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Kiki. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit just to get us started.
Yeah.
Tell us about Vindicator Solutions.
I help people navigate tough situations such as foreclosure, probate, other financial hardships. I work alongside a lot of lenders, financial advisors, and estate planning attorneys to help come up with a better way. I tell people life happens. Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and decides not to pay their mortgage. And so I just want to bring light to them and make sure that they are taken care of.
And I love that about you because from the time that we first started talking, I could tell that you really have a heart for homeowners, and that when you're out there door knocking and you're knocking on somebody's door who's in foreclosure, facing foreclosure, and you're coming to them with solutions, and I love that about your approach because that's not. People who are in foreclosure, they might be getting a lot of people knocking on their door, and that's not everyone's approach.
Right. Yeah. I try to let them know, they don't need to be necessarily, unnecessarily suffering. Most people don't know they have options.
Right. So, okay. So this leads us into this first like fact or fiction thing. All right. So, Jeff, fact or fiction? Once you're in foreclosure, there's really nothing you can do.
Fiction. It's definitely false. No, there's definitely options you have, especially the sooner you catch it.
Okay. Yeah, I experienced that. I had a friend I was helping out sell her mother's property after her mother passed away, and because of how long everything took, the house ended up in foreclosure, and it wasn't great. But talk to us a little bit about, what are the different options once you're in foreclosure?
Well, the first option I would say is to find out, what your timeline is, and then figure out what your home is worth, because you want to know what you have equity wise. I always say if you have equity, you have options. Some of the options I've helped people with in the past are just remodification of the loan, guiding them through that process, and then also helping them with securing a loan on the private sector too. So that also helps stop the foreclosure for them.
Okay. And, I've heard about that before about, a private hard money lender or a private investor coming in and basically refinancing somebody.
Right.
Because you got to believe if they're in foreclosure, like there's some financial hardship. So it's going to be difficult for them to refi or do something with a regular lender.
Yeah.
So how does that, can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Most of the time when somebody's in foreclosure, a traditional bank will not touch them any longer. And so people like myself, when I show up to their door, I find out what was the cause of them getting into foreclosure, just to make sure that when I connect them with a private money lender, they have the means to not end up back in that situation again, or else we have to come up with some creative terms in order to secure, the mortgage for them without them ending up back in that situation.
And are these private loans, are they typically short term or are some of them long term? Like, could somebody do another 30-year mortgage with a private money lender?
So I have seen both. I've done 6 months to a year, sometimes 18 months. And I also have people in my network that do foreclosure bailout loans up to 30-year mortgages.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. I didn't even realize that that was an option.
Right.
And so let's back up. Let's start at the beginning. Like, what happens when somebody enters into foreclosure?
Usually the big three, I call it: death, divorce, loss of income. That's what usually kicks off. It's a life event, right? Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and just decide not to pay their mortgage. And so the first thing I find out is, well, how much does the bank need? And that'll tell me how far back they've not paid. Every bank's different. I've seen someone with a $2,000 cure amount, which is they've only been their arrears of $2,000. I've seen people with a $20,000 cure amount, which means they haven't paid in the year, sometimes 8 months. The first thing that happens is it's brought up on the NED list in the county, which is the trustee, the county in Colorado. The trustee is the county. And so they'll send out a notice of election demand list letter. And that's the start of the foreclosure process. Now from that process, you have 4 months before the auction date. And that can be postponed. especially with someone like myself or with yourself, knowing how to talk to the trustee or the attorney or the bank in order to get it postponed to then list the property. If you have a purchase agreement with another buyer, that will also help stop the foreclosure or postpone it rather for the time to close. And so, yeah.
That's good to know. And if you do list the property, a savvy buyer's agent will see that it's in foreclosure, and then they come at it like they're trying to help you out. So once you get to the point of being in foreclosure, you really lose a lot of leverage in terms of being a seller and selling the property. But not everybody wants to sell, right? Like this is what I love about you is that like if they want to stay in the home, you have some options for them to stay in the home. But if they're willing to sell and want to sell, like there's options for that too. Um, so we've talked about one of the private money lending is one way to stay in the home. Are there other ways to stay in the home? Or is that it?
Usually, if the owner is of a certain age, there are certain products, government-backed products also, that they could refinance into, and these qualified in foreclosure also. But you have to be over 62, so you have to be reverse mortgage eligible, and that's a FHA product, and that will actually get you. That's the only product that I know, government-backed, that'll get you out of foreclosure there.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, these reverse mortgages keep popping up. I know they got a bad rap some time ago. I think that I don't know exactly why they got such a bad rap. I don't know if it was people didn't know exactly how to use them or what they were best for. But they do have some real benefits. The reverse mortgage, yeah, that's a whole nother topic. So we'll just touch on that. Yeah. Um, Let's do a myth question. So, myth, if you're behind on payments, your only option is to sell quickly.
I would say myth, you know, that is an option. I have seen some people explore that option, especially when they were already on the way out. They just finally had it with it. This was like the final straw. But there are so many other options, especially if the owner has equity. That's the big key. We're gonna get into short sales later, but that's another option as well when somebody enters foreclosure if they're underwater. And that's something you want to act on quick, and we'll get into that because it's a long process.
Yeah, the short sale is a whole nother topic. So if you're in foreclosure and you have some equity, is it possible that you could take out a home equity loan to cure the foreclosure situation? Do people do that?
So on the private level, yes. And that's the way that I am able to help in that situation when nobody else is able to. And I help them explore all the other options to make sure that what I have for them is going to be their best option. And then usually what I do in tandem with, someone like yourself, a realtor, I would help get them out of foreclosure. And if they decide, if we all come to, decision that keeping the home is no longer serving them, then that would actually allow them to take their time on the listing instead of having to sell it on a fire sale per se, because now they're out of foreclosure. So we've secured the foreclosure, but we've all decided that this is too much house for me. I need to sell. And then that's when you can help them find something a little bit more reasonable for them. So,
well, yeah. And when we talk about once you're in foreclosure, the clock is ticking. And the longer that you kind of avoid the situation and you're not figuring out what you're going to do next, the less time you have. And so when you get towards the end and if you decide you want to sell, I mean, at that point, you're probably really selling to an investor for a lower price. Whereas if you would have started at the front end of that process, like as soon as you found out that you were in foreclosure, you knew it was going to happen, like you're not keeping up with your payments. If you reach out to a realtor, on the front end of that and work with somebody who can advise you on prepping the home for sale, then you really could, hopefully get a lot more money for the sale than if you kind of leave everything as is until the last minute. And now you're selling as is and you're not really prepping it to be on market for buyers.
I've helped people in foreclosure that had really high profile jobs. So they're really intelligent folks. And so it happens to everyone, right? Over here, over there. But a lot of people's pride, sometimes they think they've got it figured out and they can handle it. And I have seen people wait to the very last minute, I always say within 14 days of the auction is a pretty smooth landing point I need to help get them out of that situation. I've done it all the way up to the day before the auction, but
Yikes.
that takes all my time, so please don't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Please don't call me the day before
Yeah.
the auction.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes when homeowners make when facing foreclosure? I know one of the things that we've already been kind of talking about is like waiting too long to ask for help. What other kinds of mistakes might they make?
Like we had mentioned a couple times, just the personal thing, like letting fear or shame really curl up. A lot of these people don't check their mail. They've stopped checking their mail months prior to this because they know it's bad. And then also you get a lot of predatory, mail and people come in to take advantage of them in this time. And so that's why it's beneficial for folks like us to get in front of them sooner than later so that we can let them know not to be afraid and operate out of place of peace and not being scared. So
Yeah, and I think along those lines, one of the worst mistakes that you could make is, putting your home under contract with the first person that comes knocking at your door. I mean, I think it would be the smart move would be to explore all of your options before saying yes to whatever somebody just came and knocked at your door and offered a way out, right? Because I think what we're trying to tell you guys today is that there's multiple ways out of foreclosure.
absolutely. I've been talking with someone recently who is in foreclosure, and she has she is motivated to leave. She said, I do not want to be in this house anymore. I want a different house. I want a smaller house. This was just too much for me. And she has had a bombardment of offers come her way. The one thing that I do differently that nobody else was looking at was, I said to her, I said, well, that's fine once you sell and get the next house, but what got you here in the first place? And it was, the income piece. I wasn't making any payments. So what I was trying to do was come up with a solution for her where she won't end up back in that situation again, even if she does sell, get a lump sum of money, and is able to put a down payment on the next house. I wanted to resolve the main issue, which is usually it's lack of income. I'd say that's one of the biggest reasons why people are in that situation: loss of job and loss of income.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so how can somebody protect their equity during foreclosure, assuming that they have a good chunk of equity?
Right. The first thing I would do is get a hold of a professional just to find out what's going on here. What do I have to lose, and what are my next options? Because what we can both do is find out what the house is worth. I know with realtors, you provide CMAs and market analysis. What I do is just basic comps based on property sold. I don't have the robust system that you have, but I've been doing it enough where I can eyeball pretty good number just based on doing flips myself.
Mhm.
And so that's the first thing I would do because once again, equity means options. When people do not have equity, that's when I usually resort to saying, talk to Kiki. We need to talk to the bank about a possible short sale at this moment. You know.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So if you've got equity, you've got equity in your home, you're facing foreclosure, definitely give us a call. Give Property Dominator a call, give Vindicator Solutions a call. Because I think that, unlike some other people, either of us are going to want to help somebody explore what all of their options are and then help them get to that next, whatever that next chapter is.
Right. I just like seeing taking care of people as if it was my own family. If somebody else cut them short, I would be, it'd be devastating, especially when they're already down. You don't want to kick them when they're down.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, it's easy for somebody to kind of figure out their value. I mean, at the very least, right? They can look on Zillow and see the Zestimate or Realtor.com or any of those kind of sites. You can get an estimate. But getting the true market value, I think is helpful, especially when you go talk to the bank. Because getting a BPO, the broker's price opinion, or the CMA, the comparative market analysis, either one of those things I think is a helpful document when you go to speak to the bank. And if you've got somebody on your side who knows what they're doing, either of us will get on the phone with the bank and speak to them. Now, that's a whole another can of worms, right? Because banks will only speak to certain people. So
On that note, I actually part of my business, I make it a point to bring a third party authorization form, because that's all they require of you to sign is a third party authorization form in order to talk on their behalf to the bank, to the lenders, to the attorneys, to the trustee, in order to just get information and pass it along and make sure that they're getting the right documents submitted to them if we're working on helping them in the foreclosure navigate the process. One of the biggest things I find right now is elderly people who are on fixed incomes, maybe disability or social security, and because of prices of homes in the last decade and taxes going up, insurance going up, you're finding a lot of these elderly people falling into foreclosure, but they don't have the technology like Zillow and stuff like that, so they don't have a clue. They don't talk to people about selling their house. They've been there 30, 40, 50 years. So that's where they're really stuck. Those people are really in the toughest spots right now, is what I'm finding.
well, and along those same lines, I mean, anybody, I would just say, like, this blanket statement, like, say no to anyone who is trying to rush you, put pressure on you, or if you do have some idea of what your value is, and it seems like they're offering you, like, I mean, obviously, investors are going to offer a lower amount, right? Um, but like you don't know, right? You don't know how low is too low, but you do know when somebody's putting pressure on you, and you do know when somebody's trying to rush you into a decision. And if that's happening, I mean, just opt out, right? Like that's the point where, you call either Vindicator Solutions or call a great realtor and get somebody on your side advocating for you.
Right. Another thing I would suggest, Kiki, is I talk to the trustee's office almost weekly, daily, sometimes, and they are a wealth of knowledge. They know the process because that's who's facilitating it. In the state of Colorado, the trustee is the county. So you can call them. They do send you a form. It's called the intent to cure form. It's usually a big, bright piece of paper. And that means, because it's important, they want to emphasize that you're acknowledging that you're in that situation, and then you have the intent to cure it. What I found in my business is that 90% of people either don't know where that letter is or never submitted it. And so I help them with that, so we can find out what that number is. But you can also call the trustee and they'll tell you your timeline, when your sale date is, if the auction is even going to happen that week. Because if they don't have a bid amount, then they could postpone it just on technicalities. There's a lot of technicalities that, because these banks are doing so many things, that they might miss a date or a deadline, and it extends your time. So it's a good point to either talk with your realtor or call the trustee's office who's handling the foreclosure.
I think the bottom line here is that knowledge is power, right? So, know what your options are. Know how much time you have. You talked earlier about people not wanting to open their mail because they just know it's bad news. So now they're ignoring all of that. But definitely open all the mail.
Especially if it's from your bank. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So knowing how much time you have, knowing all your options, and knowing how much your house is worth, so you have an idea of how much equity you have. I think those are kind of some of the big suggestions that we're making for people in foreclosure. What am I missing? I'm sure there's a couple more.
The last thing I'd add, and this is definitely something I run up against a lot in my business as well, is a well-maintained property definitely does wonders for you when you're in that situation. It also gives you more options, because when you are evaluating the equity of a property, you have to consider, repair value and repair cost. A lender is going to look at those things, especially if you're trying to qualify for an FHA product. They're going to send out an FHA appraiser. And if it doesn't qualify because repairs aren't done, then that's when we have to resort to an investor offer versus, on market or something like that.
Oh, I think that's great advice, because I could really see somebody in a foreclosure situation just feeling underwater and feeling desperate and starting to get really apathetic and, just not caring anymore. And so I think that's great advice to say, like, keep up with the maintenance, keep up with caring for the home, and keep it in good shape, because that's going to help you have a better outcome.
You're definitely going to get more money for it too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So Do you have a favorite story or a favorite client that you want to share of somebody that you helped get out of foreclosure?
Yeah,
Somebody come to mind?
I have a few, but for the full spectrum point of view here, I will go into there's a 74 and 75-year-old couple who fell into foreclosure because they were having some health issues. The husband had just recently had to have his leg amputated, and so I went to knock on their door, and when I got the answer, the lady came out and said, "No, we don't need any help. We've got it covered." And I said, I don't even think you need to be in this situation. I've got some solutions for you. And she said, come back tomorrow at the same time. And so I did. And, come to find out, they had so much equity in their house. They had a trust that they didn't know how to access, that had over $1 million left in it, and a savings account and a life insurance policy. And so they were just really, and they didn't have any kids or heirs, right? And so what we did was we actually got them a reverse mortgage because they didn't have any heirs, right? And they had plenty of equity. And the biggest thing was their payments. They couldn't afford to make the payment, which is why they got there. And that's what a reverse mortgage does, is it makes it to where they can live in the house without paying a mortgage for the rest of their life until they pass away. And I actually helped them set up a trust, and they left everything in their estate to all the charities they wanted to. They're big dog people. They did competitive, dog stuff. Yeah. And I got to help them set up all the trust that's going to leave the money behind to those charities they wanted to. And then at the end of the day, we helped them remodel their whole house too with the money they got access to. Because like I said, I'm connected to financial advisors, and I make them an integral part of my business. And we were able to help them get access to their savings fund and the money in the life insurance policy. And now they're rehabbing their entire house. And so when they do pass away, their house is going to be in great condition to where the beneficiaries can sell and have a better house to sell with more equity.
That's a fantastic story. I love that. Yeah, you really helped them out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, let's wrap this up. If you're getting notices, calls, or pressure, send them our way. We would love to help you through it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. If you like this content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.